first topic is about general aspects of vocation in the Bible, or biblical aspects of vocation in general. Then the second topic is the call narratives in the First Testament, in the Old Testament. Then finally, we'll study about call narratives in the New Testament. Okay. So we shall begin the first topic, that is about the biblical aspects, the general biblical aspects of call narratives or vocations in the Bible. Okay. Good. So the terminology that are used in the Hebrew Bible about vocation, terminology. You know, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. Okay, that's why we call this as Hebrew Bible. Hebrew Bible. So what are the terminologies that are used in the Hebrew Bible? It means in the Old Testament with regard to vocation. Good. The first word that is used about vocation in the Old Testament is known as kara. Though we write translated as Q, you have to read as kara. Okay, kara. So this word kara is found 88 times in the Old Testament. Okay. So the first terminology that is used about vocation in the Old Testament is kara, and this term kara is used 88 times in the Old Testament. What does it mean, kara? Kara means to call. Kara means to call out. Kara means to recite. Kara also means to call someone by name. Okay. So you understand the meaning? So kara means calling someone, calling out or recite, and it also means calling someone by name. And it also means call someone for a specific task or specific mission. You see? So three important aspects are there in this term kara. So kara means to call out, to call someone by name, calling someone and entrusting with him a particular task or mission. The second term that is used in the Old Testament to indicate about vocation is bahar. Okay, the first term is kara. It's all Hebrew words. Please learn few Hebrew words. The second term is bahar. And this term bahar is used 198 times in the Old Testament. So kara was used only 88 times, whereas bahar is used 198 times. What does it mean, the word bahar? So bahar means to choose someone, to select someone, to elect someone. It also means to decide something else. It also means preferring something for another. It means there is a choice is there, preference is there. Two people are there, I decide for this fellow. Two people are there, I prefer this person than this person. So the bahar implies there is a choice. And one is chosen and another one is not chosen. One is preferred and another one is not preferred. And it also means, bahar also means take a keen look at. I don't simply choose someone. I look at a person. I have a keen look at that person. I examine him. I test him. And after all that, a particular person is chosen. That is what we call bahar. Many of you are there, sisters are there. Suppose you want to go and to buy one sari or one chudidar or some cloth. Of course, fathers, brothers also, you want to go and buy one shirt or whatever may be. You don't simply go and pick one and come. No. What we do, we bahar. It means we choose a particular sari or particular shirt or particular chudi, not simply choosing and coming. But we take so many things, so many saris, so many shirts, everything are put together. And one by one, we look at them. We take a keen look at each cloth, each sari or each shirt. We test them, we examine them, we put them this light or we remove it, we do this, that. And after doing all these intensive testing and examining, we choose a particular dress. And this is what we call bahar. So in occasion, God is not simply by random choosing someone. No. God takes a keen look at a person. The Lord tests, the Lord examines, and then he prefers a particular person for another. So in our own families, we have our brothers, siblings, our sisters. And why I am chosen, not my elder brother is chosen. Why I am chosen, not my younger sister is chosen. Or younger brother is chosen. Because God bahars. So God prefers me, not my elder brother, not my younger sister. God takes a keen look at me, tests me, examines me. And after all that, God decides, you are the one I want. And that is the meaning of this Hebrew term bahar. Kara and then bahar. Good. So this usage, that is this bahar, implies a careful, well thought out choice. That's the difference. Okay, that in Kara, this aspect is there, not there. Whereas in bahar, a particular person is chosen, not simply, but after a careful and well thought out process. I am chosen very, very carefully. I am so precious in the sight of God. And God chose me. God elected me. God preferred me after a careful, well thought out process. So that is the idea this particular term bahar explains to us. Okay. And we know Yahweh chose Israel. Yahweh chose Israel to be holy and thereby to serve as his witness among the nations. So there were so many nations were there. God could have chosen any other nations. But God chose Israel, that's all. That vocation as a free gift was given to Israel, to that particular nation. God bahar Israel. After going through, examining, testing, carefully thinking over, God chose Israel. So the word used, the Hebrew word used here is bahar. God chose Israel to be holy. So that's the occasion. Be holy as I am holy. And being holy, you are called to serve as my witness among the nations. So the choice, the bahar, the election of Israel is not based on the greatness of Israel, but based on the greatness of Lord's love. Israel is chosen not because of who the Israelites are, but they are chosen because of who Yahweh, God is, the Lord is. So the election is not based on the merit of Israel, not on the greatness of Israel, but it is based on the greatness of the Lord, based on the greatness of Lord's great love for Israel. And similarly, that Baha also implies that God can always reject if they deviate from the vocation. So when someone is called to be God's chosen one, he or she is also expected to lead a life worthy of his call. And if that worthiness is not there, if that promise is not fulfilled, then they can also, the Lord can also remove that person. That vocation can also be taken away. That's why we know when Israel committed sin, was not following the commandment, the covenantal obligation, then we know how Israel was rejected by the Lord. So very important. Be faithful as I am faithful. Be holy as I am holy. Follow, some sounds were there. Follow all the commandments. If you are not following the commandments, then the Lord can also reject us. Okay. So when a person is selected, is elected, is also called for a function, is given a responsibility. So God does not simply call us to go for picnic, or God doesn't call us simply come here and eat and go. No, we are called for a purpose. We are called for a function. We are given a mission. We are given a responsibility. So the consecration or the vocation always goes with a mission. Okay, the call always goes with the mission. Israel was chosen for a mission of being holy and being witnesses to God's love. So Baha refers normally to concrete occasion and collective occasion, whereas the term Kara refers to individual occasion. So later I will explain to you the difference between collective occasion and individual occasion. So whenever a group is called, it is called collective occasion. Remember, Israel as a group is called. Israel as a nation is called. That is called a collective occasion. Then individuals, Abraham is called. Moses is called. Joshua is called. That is what we call individual occasion. Yes, personal occasion. One individual is called. So whenever a nation is called, when we have a collective occasion, the term that is used is Baha. When personally one individual is called, the term that is used is Kara. Okay. Then Septuagint is a Greek Bible. Septuagint is the translation of the Hebrew Bible into Greek. According to the legend, so 70 scholars, biblical scholars, were involved in translating the Hebrew Bible into Greek Bible. And that's why it is known as Septuagint. So Septuagint in Greek means 70. 70 people, there are a lot of legendary stories are there about it. So if we write 70, LXX, 50, 10, 10, so together 70, Septuagint, it means the Greek Bible, the translation of the Hebrew Bible into Greek. So when the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, wherever they found the term kara, they translated into kalain. Okay, this is Greek, okay. So wherever they found the Hebrew term kara, they translated into kalain. So kalain mean also the same, like to call, to invite someone, to call someone by name, to entrust a particular mission, a particular task, a particular responsibility to someone. All these ideas are explained by the Greek term kalein. Then wherever they saw the Hebrew term bahar, they translated into eklegein or eklelegmai. So eklegein or eklelegmai. Okay. So in the New Testament, when we come to New Testament, New Testament was written in Greek, whereas Old Testament was written in Hebrew. And later that Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, that is known as Septuagint. So I told you, wherever they saw kara, they translated into kalein. Wherever bahar was found, they translated into eklegein. Now, New Testament was directly written in Greek. So they used the term kalein to imply to call someone aloud or to utter in a loud voice. So kalein means to call aloud, to utter in a loud voice, and metaphorically, it also means passing from one state into another. Okay, so metaphorically, it means passing from one state into another. We have a beautiful saying of this in First Peter chapter 1 verses 2. First Peter chapter 2 verse 9. I just read for you, but I just read for you this verse. Listen carefully. So First Peter chapter 2 verse 9. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you. This is where that word kalein is used. Who called you? Kalein. Who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. So you see the metaphorical change. From darkness, it becomes light. So metamorphism. Butterflies, they go through this process of metamorphism from one state to another. From cocoon, they become butterflies. And that change of state from one state to another, in Greek, it is explained by the Greek term kalein. So what it implies is, in our vocation, when God calls us, we are passing from one state to another. That's why Saint Paul will say, we are no more the old person. The old has gone. Behold, a new has come. So in every vocation, we are born anew. We become a new person. We are no more the old person. And that idea is explained by this term kalein. And kalein also means to invite one to something, very especially to participate in something, to participate in a mission, to participate in a responsibility. So kalein means inviting someone to participate in something noble, something sacred. It also means calling by name. I called you by name, you are mine. The word that is used is kalein. Call someone by name. It also means give a name to someone. Give a name to someone. So, in the Near East culture, giving a name means that person belongs to me. So that's why only parents can name a child. It means the child belongs to the parents. The parents can say, this belongs to me. This is my child. This is my son. This is my daughter. And when God says, I called you by name, it means you belong to me. You are my possession. You belong to me. And that is the meaning of this term kalein. Then yekle legmai, equivalent to bahar of the Hebrew term, means selection. Someone is chosen. The apostles were selected. The apostles were chosen. Jesus had many followers. And among many followers, some were called to be his close, radical followers, what we call the apostles. Bahar, someone is selected, someone is chosen. That is the meaning of Ek Lekmai. Now, be it in the Old Testament or New Testament, one who is called, that's very important aspect. One who is called is given the commandment to abandon everything and depart. Halak. So another Hebrew word, halak. Halak means go, depart, go from here. So a person who is called, what he has to do? He has to give up everything and go. Halak. Immediately halak. From this halak only talak comes. In Aramaic, Muslims know the divorce, they use 3 talak. Talak. And this talak comes from this halak. Because Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, all of them are like brothers and sisters, very closely related. So the person who is called is given the commandment to give up everything, and then he is called to abandon everything and follow the Lord. How to follow? Give up and go. Where to go? I will show you where you should go. So you read the command, this vocation story of Abraham, we'll study later. Moses, Joshua, Gideon, David, Elijah, Amos, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the disciples of Jesus, all of them are asked to go. I will note down when we study about those calls. Go, halak. Go where I show you. So this is very important. The one who is called cannot be in the same place. No. The moment you are called, give everything, give up everything, and halak, and go. And same thing happens now also. The moment you are called, you leave your family, go from your family and go to a place where God tells you to go. So the order to go is repeated almost in all the call narratives, all the occasional narratives. When we study about it, I will highlight it. So the halak is very, very important. I will explain also at the end of the class why this term is repeated again and again. So one whom God calls, the one who calls is always God. We have already seen. It's a gift from God. So in the Bible also, one who calls is always God. And God can call us directly, or he can also use mediators. Often God doesn't call directly, but he calls through mediators. And who are these mediators? We find two types of mediators. Okay, two types of mediators. One is an angel. So angels are sent by God to communicate God's message. So the angels are messengers of God. So God can make use of the angels, like, Angel Gabriel, Archangel came and communicated the vocation to Mother Mary. So angels can be used, or sometimes another human person can also be used to communicate God's vocation. Like you see, David's vocation was communicated through another human being, Samuel. Okay, or Joshua. Joshua's vocation was communicated by another human person, Moses. But this is very important. The initiative always comes from God. Okay, so the one who calls is always God, and he can call directly, but often he doesn't call directly, he uses mediators. And who are those mediators? Angels or other human beings. But what is important is the first step, the initiative always comes from God. Okay. So with vocation in the Bible, there is also divine promises, including material benefits for the individual or to your family. When God calls someone, he doesn't abandon us. He tells you, I will bless you. I will give you all that you are given up. I will take care of you. I will be with you. Not only you will be blessed, through you, your family will also be blessed. That's why sometimes, even today in our societies, they say, if your family has a religious, a priest or a sister, then people will say, you are blessed, your family is blessed, because there is a religious in your family. And because of her or because of him, God is going to bless you, bless your family. That is what we call divine promise. You remember Peter? He goes and asks Jesus, Lord, we have given up everything. What are you going to give? Because we have given up everything for your sake. And what Jesus says, all that you have given up, I am going to give you 100-fold here on earth. Don't think we'll get only after our death. No. Jesus makes it very clear. You will receive here on earth divine promise. All that you have given up, I am going to give you 100-fold here on earth. And also eternal life after your death. So the vocation always implies there is divine promise. So what it means is, the moment you are called, you have become a blessing. You are a mediator of blessing. Through you, your family is blessed. Through you, your parents are blessed. Your brothers are blessed. Sisters are blessed. Relatives are blessed. Friends are blessed. God is with you. God promises is divine grace, blessings, which includes also material benefits. Okay. Now, after studying about those terms, Kara, Bahar, Kalayin, Yek Legain, and then we studied also about Halak, give up everything, abandon everything, and follow. Go, Halak, where I show you. And it is always God who initiates this vocation. God can directly call us, or he may use his mediators. Often he uses angels or another human beings. And with vocation, there is also always divine promise. And divine promise includes material benefits. Okay. After that, after having studied the terms, now we shall come to the second subtitle, that is the form and the significance of call narratives. What does it mean? The form of call narratives. The form of call narratives. What does it mean? So, literary genre and literary form. What does it mean by literary genre and literary form? Okay. So sometimes we have confusion between what is this literary genre and what is the literary form and so on. I just give you in short, just for you to explain what it means by literary genre and what does it mean by literary form. See, suppose you think you go to the library, No, library has different sections, no? We have stories, we have novels, we have letters, we have essays, we have biographies, we have scientific books, we have fictions, we have history. So these are all what we call a literary genre. Okay, so literary genre means the general sections like poems, stories, novels, fictions, scientific stories, scientific facts, so essays, letters, all that, that general section is known as literary genre. Literary form means a fixed pattern, a standard pattern. For example, just for you to understand, some of you might have already made final proposition, or some of you may be preparing to make final proposition. So you print a, let us say, an invitation, okay, an invitation letter for your final proposition, invitation for final proposition. What will you do? Generally, what will you do? You don't waste much time, isn't it? What you'll do? You go and take one old final proposition invitation, maybe the previous years, or what your friend has done. And then what you do, already it will begin with one biblical quotation, and then you change, and then you put the biblical quotation that you like, so you change it. Then there will be the place where you are going to receive, and then the bishop or who is going to celebrate mass, and then you write your name, and then you write the place, and then that's all. Everything is ready. So it has a fixed pattern, fixed form. This is how it has to be written. Or a marriage invitation. You see a marriage invitation, you don't get confused, because you know this is how marriage invitation should be. So there will be a name of the bridegroom, then a bride, and then where mass is going to be celebrated, when it is going to be celebrated, and then finally all are invited for this function. So the marriage invitation has its own structure, its own pattern, a standard way of writing. See what we study also in our schools, no? How to write a letter, how to write a friendly letter, how to write a formal letter, how to write one friendly or informal letter. So how to write a formal letter, we start with from, address to, then from, and then dear or respected sir, and body of the letter, at the end we write. So it has a structure, and that structure, that standard pattern is known as literary form. Okay, so in the occasion call, the literary genre is narratives. It's all written in narratives, narration. And what is the literary form? We'll study later. Okay. So understand, in vocation, the literary genre is a narratives. It is a narration. It's not biography. It is not a novel. It is not an essay. It is not a poem, but it comes under narratives. And in that call narrative, we have what we call as literary form of call narratives, which we will study. Okay. Now, call narrative, I already said, this is the literary genre, narrative. And there are different narratives are there. For example, there is infancy narratives are there. Passion narratives are there. Or miracle narratives are there. Healing narratives are there. And among different narratives, what we are going to study is a call narrative, where uh, vocation is being narrated. And it has its own form, called narratives form, literary form. What is that literary form? This is very, very important. We are going to study. So there are different people who give different pattern, literary form. I am going to propose you one form which is proposed by a Bible scholar known as Lenchak. And more or less all the patterns given by different people are more or less the same. What does it say? What is the literary pattern or literary form proposed by Lenchak? First one, there is a religious experience or an encounter with the divine. So God calls someone, and there is a divine encounter between God who calls and the person who is called. That is the first aspect. You remember Moses? He is there taking care of the flocks of his father-in-law, and there the Lord appears in a burning bush and tells him, Moses, Moses, and then calls him by name, and he goes there. And there that encounter takes place between the Lord who calls and Moses who is called. Or remember St. Paul, Saul, he is going there in the horse, and suddenly the Lord calls him through thunder or lightning, and he is thrown out. And God tells Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And this Saul says, oh, who are you? And this is what we call as religious experience or encounter with the divine. So the first aspect is the meeting, the encounter, the religious experience where God appears directly or through his mediators, often through angels or another human being, and encounters the person who is called for vocation. That's the first pattern, okay, first phase. Then a person who is called is given a commission, mission, or a command to do something. A mission is given. I already told you, every vocation has a mission. We are called for mission. So God doesn't call us just for picnic or just to go there and have a dinner out. No, he calls for a noble task. He calls for a mission. He gives us a commission. Remember Moses? He was given a mission. What is the mission? You go there to Egypt and liberate my people from the slavery, from the bondage. Or think about Mary. She was given a mission of becoming the mother of God. Or think about Gideon. He was given a mission to go and defeat the Midianites. Or St. Paul, he was given a mission. You are going to be an apostle to the Gentiles. That is your mission. So, a religious experience where God encounters the person, and then in that encounter, the person is given the purpose of that mission, purpose of that call, a commission, a mission, a command to do something. Third, the person who is called normally hesitation, objection on the part of the one who is called. So remember Moses, oh Lord, I do not know how to speak. I'm a stammerer. I don't want to go. Please send someone else. Or imagine Jeremiah. I do not know how to speak. I'm only a boy. Or Mary. How is it possible? I do not know any person. I'm not married. How is it possible? So, when a mission is given to a person, generally the person hesitates, objects. And we have to understand this aspect not as running away from mission, not trying to escape from the mission. Rather, it has to be understood as genuine expression of one's inability to carry out such a huge task. So the person only says that this task is so big. How can I do it? I'm after all an ordinary person. Like think about Moses, no? He was asked to go the same place from where he escaped and to bring the people from the slavery. They are there for many centuries. Do you think it's an easy task that he goes and he tells the king Pharaoh, the Lord called me, told me, please leave all my people. I'm going to take them to a promised land. Do you think the king will immediately allow? Pharaoh will simply allow? How difficult it is. Or imagine Saint Paul who was killing the Christians, persecuting a Christian, and suddenly he goes and preaches about Jesus. And will people accept? So he says, how is it possible? I was a persecutor. How will people accept me? Difficult task. Imagine Mary, who is not married, virgin, and the Lord says, you will bear a son. How is it possible? So, this has to be understood not as a running away or escapism, but the person genuinely feels that the responsibility entrusted to me by the Lord is huge. I am not prepared for this mission. It is not capable. It is beyond my capacity. I cannot carry on. So with all sincerity, with all their honesty, the person expresses the difficulty in carrying out this task. This is what we call as objection or hesitation. Then the Lord assures what we call assurance. So this assurance and affirmation of the vocation is normally done by words as well as by signs. What is the assurance by words? It always says, don't worry, I will be with you. Don't worry. This is, I will be with you. Why are you afraid? When I am with you, who can be against you? When I am with you, what can be impossible? Everything is possible. With God, remember to Mary? With God, everything is possible. Don't hesitate thinking, how is it possible? Can I do it? It is so huge, big responsibility. No, I am with you. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. Don't fear. When I am with you, nothing is impossible. Remember the vocation of Joshua. As I was with Moses, I will be with you. Don't hesitate. I will not forsake you. I will not abandon you. I will not desert you. I will be with you till the end. Don't worry. Secondly, it also means the mission is not your mission. The mission belongs to me, belongs to God. And it is also the responsibility of God to carry out that mission. So it's God's responsibility. If I have called you, if I have given you the mission, it is also my responsibility to see that this mission will be carried out. That's why I will be with you. And if you think it's my mission, and I can carry out with my own ability, with my own talents, you will fail. No, not possible. But when you surrender yourself as an instrument in my hands, I will carry out that mission through you. You are only an instrument. You are like a clay in the hands of your potter, in my hands, as a clay. I will mold you. I will make the way I want. So, if you look at it from a human point of view, if you look at it from your own human eyes, yes, it is a difficult mission. But when you look at it from the divine viewpoint, from the eyes of God, then everything becomes easy. The mission is nothing because God is there. When God is with us, everything is possible. So that is how the meaning, don't worry, I will be with you. So don't hesitate, don't object, don't doubt about your ability. Don't ask the question, how is it possible? I am with you. Everything is possible. So the typical divine assurance is this: don't be afraid, I am with you. And you remember those who did the course under Father Lawrence, he was explaining to you that this particular expression of I will be with you, the Lord who walks with us, the Lord who accompanies us, the Lord who is always with us. Now, there are also others who will ask them this question: who are you to say all this? Show me a sign that it is you, God, who calls me. You know, the Jews are interested in asking signs. They asked Jesus also, no, show me a big sign so that we will believe all that you say. Show me a sign. God knows. And that's why, though we don't find in all okay, to confirm that it is God who calls. So sign is given. What is the sign given to Moses? It is said, this will be a sign for you when you bring back the people on the same mountain, Mount Sinai, that you will worship me, that you will offer sacrifice to me on this mountain. And that will be a sign for you. And then we can also understand, you know, he was told to put the stick there, and then it becomes like a snake. Put your hand inside, and the hand becomes like, you know, white with leprosy. And then put again, then it becomes all right. So different signs. And remember, Mary was given a sign. What was the sign? Anyway, imagine. What is the sign given to Mary? Your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, has conceived, and that will be a sign for you that everything is possible by God. You see, it's very beautiful, huh? If you look at this, how God calls us, God gives commission, and how we hesitate and we object. And then God, how he assures us, saying, don't worry, my daughter, I am with you. I will take care of you. I will not forsake you. I will not abandon you. And then some of us find it very difficult even then to believe. Go ahead in our missionary journey. And then the Lord gives us assurance, telling us, don't worry, it is I who called you. I remember when I was teaching about this lesson in our class. Then later, one sister, who was preparing for a final profession, one junior sister, came to me and shared about her experience of receiving a sign. See, most of you might have received sign, okay? Sometimes you may not be aware. Yes, I assure you, sisters, I tell you, brothers and sisters, all of us have received one or other signs to confirm that God has called us to this way of life. I'll just share with you the sign that that sister shared with me. See, she was from Jharkhand. You know, nowadays in many of our seminaries or convents, we have many students from North India. So they were, I think, around 7, 8 of them novices from Jharkhand. All of them are from same state, Jharkhand. And this novice mistress happened to be from South India. You know, most of our senior sisters, senior fathers, they are all from South. And this sister was from South, whereas all the novices, 7 of them, were from Jharkhand, and 1 or 2 also from other parts of North India. And this novice mistress, who was from in southern part of India, South India, she was always scolding these girls from Jharkhand, telling them, you fellows, you are very montus, fools. You don't understand anything at all. Very, very lazy fellows. No culture you have, no faith you have. I have been teaching and teaching. You don't understand at all. When we were novices, those days, all the novices were from South. How active we were, how intelligent we were, how we were so good, this, that, obedient, and you fellows, useless fellows. She was going on, this noise mistress from South India, going on scolding these poor girls from Jharkhand. And this sister, whom I said, she was so much offended that this sister is going on scolding them like muntu, fools, all that, no? So one day, so this congregation also has a lot of love for adoration. So they used to have adoration very often. Practically every day they used to have adoration, evening adoration. So she was literally crying, it seems, sitting in front of the Eucharistic Lord. Lord, you called me. Why? Every day we are offended like this. Why this sister is offending us, scolding us, telling us that we are fool, mondus, lazy fellows, doing nothing. So she was actually, literally, she was weeping. And then she was even thinking of leaving the novitiate and going back. And there she received a call. There she received a sign. So in the silence of the heart, you remember I told you about the silence of the heart, the intelligence of heart. So in the silence of the heart, she heard a feeble voice. She heard something. The Lord spoke to her. The Lord said, go and read 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27. So those who have Bible, you can take and you can read what is this verse. So she heard an inner voice telling her, go and read 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27. She was telling me that time she was not even aware that there are so many books in the Bible. There is something called the 1 Corinthians, and also was not even aware. No, remember. But somehow that gave her a kind of a spirit, no? That 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27. And then as soon as the adoration was over, she took the Bible and she opened the Bible and read 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27. I read for you from 26 onwards, okay? From 26 onwards I read. Consider your own call, brothers and sisters. So Paul is speaking. Consider your own vocation, brothers and sisters. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. Beautiful verse, huh? Chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians. Consider your own call, brothers and sisters. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. And this is the verse which touched that sister. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. So God chose what is mundu, foolish in the world, to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. And for that sister, this is the sign. God told him to read this verse. And she said, after reading this verse, she was so happy. No more crying. She jumped in joy. This is what God called me. And this is the sign that God has given me. Then she made also final profession. And she's a beautiful, very committed sister now. She used to talk to me often. And I'm sure one day she will become noise mistress. Okay. The noise mister who go on, scolded her and offended her, mocked at her. I'm sure one day in that place, this sister will become. That is what God is. This is the sign that God gives. I also received a lot of signs, especially when we are in a difficult moment and so on. Anyway, since there is not much time, I'm not able to share all that. Okay. So you see, a religious experience or encounter with God who calls and the person who is called. A mission is given. The person objects and hesitates. And then God assures us by words, don't worry, I will be with you. And then he also gives a sign. And finally, the person who is called, he surrenders acceptance. So call, mission, hesitation, assurance, sign, and then finally the person accepts. And the beautiful acceptance we have in the Bible only with regard to Mary, Mother Mary, So Mother Mary at the end, she says, behold, the handmaid of the Lord. Be done to me according to thy word. And that is how Mary surrenders herself to the vocation. Behold, the handmaid of the Lord. Be it done to me according to thy word. Okay, so this is what we call the literary form of Colnaratives. And I invite you to reflect. Okay. And then, especially some of you who are preparing for yourself for final profession, go through all these 5 processes. In what way I encountered the Lord? Where God communicated to me, you are precious to me. I have called you by name. You are mine. What is that experience? Some of you would not have received that experience till now. Pray for that experience. Unless we have that divine experience, divine encounter, our life here may not make any sense at all. So, the divine encounter. Then, imagine, what is the mission that God has given you? We have our own charism in our religious congregations. So, God will not ask us to do something which is outside our charism. Okay. So, within that charism, we may have our own personal charism. Okay, God has, our congregation has its own charism which we have received as a gift from the Lord through our founder and foundresses. And within that wider framework, we can also receive some personal charism. What am I going to be? And then what is my hesitation? When I think about my lifelong commitment in this particular congregation, How comfortable am I? How confident am I? Is it possible? Sometimes we may ask these questions and think about the Lord who assures you, don't worry, I will be with you. And you may also receive some signs. Look at the signs. Don't think signs will be like, coming from heaven as you are in the chapel. Suddenly the roof of the chapel split. And then from top, somebody fell just in front of you, or put his hand and took you and taken you somewhere else. No. Don't look for extraordinary signs. But through ordinary signs, God helps us to assure, to confirm that I am called to this way of life. And then finally, like Mary, am I able to surrender myself to the Lord, saying, Lord, I am your handmaid. Be done to me according to your will, according to your words. Okay. Then finally, in this chapter, we have the types of calls. So in the Bible, we have two types of calls, which I already mentioned. One is known as collective call, and another one is known as individual call. Collective call and individual call. So collective call means a group of people are called together. A race, a nation is called together for a particular mission. And individual calls means individual is called by the Lord. The individual is called. So in the Old Testament, the collective occasion was given to the Israelites. So God chose the entire race, the Israelites, to be holy, to be his people, to be his chosen race, royal priesthood, holy nation. And then they committed sin and they were not faithful to the call. And because they were not faithful to the call, they were punished. And then later, the same call was renewed, was given anew to the remnant Israel. Remnant Israel means those faithful Israel. Not that all of them committed sins. Of course, there might have been some who were faithful, pious. So from that remaining Israel, that faithful Israel, God once again renews his vocation. That is what we call remnant Israel. Okay. So in the Old Testament, the collective occasion was first given to the Israelites, the entire race, and they did not live a life according to their vocation. So they were punished, and then the vocation was renewed with a small group, which we call a remnant Israel, or remaining Israel, the faithful Israel. And individual calls means the individual persons. So in the Bible, we have a lot of individuals were called: Abraham, Moses, Joshua, Gideon, and Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, all that. And interestingly, it's a very important aspect. Please note, the individuals were called for what was the mission given to the individuals. Often in the Old Testament, the individuals are called to be at the service of collective call. So individuals were called to remind the Israelites that you are not faithful to your call. So Jeremiah was called to remind them that you are not faithful. Or Amos was called to remind the Israelites that you are not faithful to your collective occasion. You are not leading a life like a chosen race, royal priesthood, holy nation. You are committing sin of unfaithfulness, infidelity to Yahweh. You are committing sin against social justice. You are not taking care of the poor and needy. You are oppressing them. You are exploiting them. You are not leading a life as a chosen race. So God is going to punish. So always the individuals were called to invite the collective people to be faithful to their vocation. So in the New Testament, the collective vocation is given to everybody, to all of us. Very important. So by dying on the cross, Jesus removed the curtain that separated the Israelites from the Gentiles. So Old Testament collective call was given only to a particular group. But in the New Testament, no more separation, no more distinction, no more discrimination. By shedding the blood, Jesus made a new covenant by which he invites all of us. And that's why we read from, you remember, in the beginning I read a passage from 1 Peter, where he speaks about the new chosen race. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 speaks about the same covenantal passage, but applied to everybody, every Christian. You see, you are a chosen race. This is not for Israelites, to all of us, the entire nation, every human being. You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you, who has given you this vocation, collective vocation, who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. So today we are Christians. We have received this call because the collective call is not restricted to one race, but to everybody. So individuals are called both in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament for the service of the collective calls